Hello, my name is Lucas Graham. I am a student here at California Baptist, and I am currently going through our final video submission for exercise physiology. Through this video, I will be speaking about the challenges and difficulties as we went through all of our testing and I'll be comparing week 1 all the way through week 8, or week 7, as we're in week 7 right now. And I will be going through the mile first. So my observations with the mile, one thing that I have to keep in mind is that I run here at California Baptist University with the cross country and track team, and so that definitely makes a difference with my training and my preparation. And so a lot of these tests were much easier because I was able to, I've been prepared for them because I am on the cross and track team. But one thing that I did notice with the mile is that when I first encountered the mile run, I was more in shape for a 5K, 10K type of race. And so it was definitely a little bit more difficult to keep up with a 5:15 pace, but as that pace was set for me in and week out, I would go and hit that pace every single week. It got a little easier. My muscles were able to adapt quicker, a little bit faster twitch, more of that type 2, probably type 2A muscle fiber, and that's what I was able to experience in the mile run. All right, now on to the Cooper's test, which is actually the 1.5 mile test. I was able to easily slide into that pace as well because it was the same pace as my mile, and also it was a fairly similar pace to how I felt during cross country season, and so it was a fixed pace for me. Pretty simple. Definitely got my heart rate up and got my heart rate pumping. But as for feel, not much of a difference between the mile and the mile and a half for me. So that was my experience in the Cooper's test. Now moving into our 3 performance videos that we have for this week. This week I actually broke my thumb, so I was unable to complete those tasks. But I will talk about the adaptations that I experienced going through those through week 6, from week 1 to week 6. I'm going to start with the push-ups, the push-up test. The push-up test was actually the most difficult one for me because I am a distance runner. Pretty much all of my strength is in my lower body. So definitely transitioning into a push-up position and doing push-ups in general is just a little bit more difficult for me because I'm very undertrained in my upper body. And so one thing that I found very difficult was just week 1 and week 2. I was very sore immediately after the test and even 2 or 3 days after the test. Also during this period of time, we were also in the weight rooms for cross country and track, and so I was very sore from lifting weights in the gym as well, and so I'm sure that contributed to my soreness as well. But it was a very difficult test as I went all the way through week 3, I would say. And then after week 3, I realized that the testing got much easier, and I was able to gain a little bit of muscle endurance. I'm not typically in a anaerobic stage, and so because I'm a distance runner, I'm more aerobic. And so anaerobic is a little bit more difficult for me as a runner. So definitely a difficult test. And now I'm going to transition into the sit-up test. So the sit-up test has the same type of reasoning behind it. We were in the weight room a lot, working through a lot of exercises with our core. And so anything with core, I was already sore, and then going all the way through week 3, I would say is very difficult. But every time I was hitting consistently right around 78 sit-ups per minute. So I felt like I was fairly well prepared for that because as a distance runner, you have to have a very strong core. And so that's something that our coaches concentrate on a lot. So I didn't notice too much of an adaptation for my core in the sit-up testing, but definitely in the push-ups. And here's my final sit and reach. Finally, for week 7, our last critical assignment submission, we were asked to do 3 examples of aerobic adaptations to training and 3 examples of anaerobic adaptations to training. And so I have a list here to keep myself on track, because it's hard to remember all this information just to memorize it. So I'm just going to keep myself on track and maybe read through some of it just to keep myself going. So first I'm going to talk about aerobic adaptations through 8 weeks of training. There are many adaptations that we see aerobically. And the first of those is heart size. Second is stroke volume. Third is heart rate, cardiac output, blood flow, blood pressure, and blood volume. These are an example of a few adaptations that we would see through 8 weeks of training. But I pinpointed 3 of those to go a little bit more in depth on. So the first one I went into depth on is heart size. As a product of constant endurance training, the heart undergoes growth adaptations. So here we see different walls of the heart growing, just as a normal striated muscle would grow. We see through endurance training, our heart is put under stress, and through constant endurance training, it would grow in size, thus increasing the amount of blood that it is able to pump, how many milliliters it's supposed to pump, or it can pump in one pump, which is called our stroke volume. And that leads us into our next one, stroke volume. Stroke volume is measured specifically by milliliters of blood produced by the heart per beat. At 8 weeks of training, you could see max stroke volume jumps from 110 milliliters per beat to 150 milliliters per beat. So this is right around the middle of the road adaptation that we see for anyone who's undergoing endurance training. And then the last one is heart rate. Heart rate, more specifically resting heart rate, can be decreased at least 10 beats per minute, at most 10 beats per minute in 8 weeks of training because of adaptations that we see, how the blood is how the heart contractile fibers to be capable of ejecting larger amounts of blood than before. So here we see that the heart is becoming much more effective, and even while you're resting, your heart is working less. Is working a lot less to pump more amount of blood because it's become a lot more effective and it's a lot stronger at pushing out that blood. Next, we're going to go into our anaerobic section here. So our adaptations that we see through 8 weeks of training and endurance is, I'm going to start with the muscle adaptations. We see type 2 muscle fibers will develop large cross-section areas. In type 1, we do not see large adaptations because of shorter bouts of exercise. So we'd see a little bit more adaptation in type 1 in aerobic area, but more in anaerobic we see a larger adaptation in type 2 fibers. Secondly, in our anaerobic adaptations through 8 weeks of endurance training, we see that our body becomes a lot more efficient at creating ATP. This is a huge step for us as we are able to create more ATP more efficiently. Our body is able to use that energy for whatever it needs and demands that it has. And then lastly, our final adaptations that we see in anaerobic training through 8 weeks of endurance is that our body is more efficient with the glycolytic system because of the short bouts of 30 seconds or less of activity. So we see that our body's using the glycolytic system a lot more in this stage, and it's also a lot more effective at using the glycolytic stage. So glycolytic system, sorry. And so those are the 3 anaerobic and 3 aerobic adaptations that we see through 8 weeks of training. And this information can be applied to athletes as they're moving forward with their training, and to keep them current and up to date on what are the things they need to be working. Kind of like in our assignment, how we talked about the triathletes, how they had many questions. This would answer many questions for them. So this is a great knowledge to have. So thank you. The last portion of our prompt is to give a personal experience or a Bible verse for the intricacies and all the things that we've learned about the body, and how we understand how complex it is and how God has created us in such an amazing way. I have a short story about that. When I was in 8th grade, I really injured my ankle really bad, and I remember that night I prayed and I asked God to give me healing in my ankle. And the next morning I woke up and I was able to walk around, and there was a little bit of pain, but I know that I had been touched, and I've been healed from my ankle because it was a really, really bad ankle injury. And I was actually able to compete that day in a race. And I just remember that so distinctly because I remember that God really came through and delivered. And I understand that doctors, if they were to diagnose that injury, or if they were to go through and look at that injury, it would have been a much bigger deal, and they would have taken lots of time to recover. So God knows us perfectly. And the verse that I have for that is 1 Peter 5:7, or 5:7. Cast out all of your anxiety on Him because He cares for you. So that's the verse that really keeps me centered when I understand if I'm going through an injury or anything. So that's it.